today's topic is again something that holds very close to my heart. I think as women climb ladders, women or men, one of the very important elements of growing as a leader is to be able to nurture high performance, high impact teams. At certain levels, it's not just only about how you are driving yourself and your performance, but also caters down to how are you driving not just efficiencies and efficacies, but how are you driving real high performance and risk appetite, in your team members as well. So if I could get started with you, Rahul, on this one, what do you think are some of the key traits that are required to become a leader that drives high performance and high impact teams inside an organization? And what have been some of your key observations of women doing it, in a certain way, and how has that helped them?
The standard are, of course, to build, strong teams. Over hire capability. Don't under hire below you. I think, which is a very Asian context, men and women alike. I think I have rather found women leaders, are able to hire stronger people. So I think that is distinctively different.
Yeah.
The second thing I've seen for successful women leaders to be able to give them a safe space that uh, I'm not Google. I do not know everything. You have your own strengths. We are an ensemble together. However, there are certain things that I lead. I think that sense of purpose or credo, I've seen certain women leaders able to set very, very openly, transparently, and not in an insecure way. So to me, I'll kind of restrict it to just these two because all the other things are common in terms of task focus, achievement orientation. I think there is no difference. But I think where women leaders can successfully do something differently are these two.
Thank you. I think very crisp and pointed takeaways in terms of how women definitely are much more secure to hire smarter people. And one of the, in fact, hiring guidelines that we have at Jombe is to always hire someone who's smarter than you, because that's how we learn and we grow. And of course, having a sense of purpose and having things that help you focus on certain aspects and leaving the rest for the people who can do them the best way possible is also one of the elements of being secure in your positions as well. Aarti, your thoughts on this? What do you think are key to create high performance, high impact teams, and how are women able to drive it? Maybe differently, maybe similarly, but what are some of their strong areas?
So again, I'll keep it crisp. Maybe for me, the two important key points, and that resonates with me as well, is naturally I feel that being a women trait myself, emotional intelligence and problem solving. I think these aspects or soft skills like act naturally in us, and that's also to do with the daily. It's not just to connect with the professional condo, but it's also about the personal attributes we bring in, and we try to help solve and navigate through these challenges day in day out. So for me, I think these are an important, a skill to which naturally comes for women. And I think when they lead in roles, to your point, these are some aspects which if they, just practice day in day out, because these are natural aspects, very high on emotional intelligence, on the humility of how they connect with people around, and being more empathetic in terms of the connect, etc. Taking the teams through are some of the keynotes which I would want to say, when one look in terms of aspiring and moving, progressing on.
Thank you. And now let me switch gears a little bit because this is this is to learn from your personal experiences as well. And Rahul, if you could go back, the many careers that you have spent, many years that you have spent in your career, I'm sure there were pivotal times when you had to kind of up your game. Look at nurturing smarter teams, but to driving that high performance, and performance is something that is getting vocalized in organizations now publicly without any hesitance. But since the beginning, every organization likes to grow. Every organization has always wanted a high performing workforce. So any anecdote, any phase of your career you remember where you were in this pivotal movement, where you were driving high performance teams, and what were some of the things that you did to nurture that high performance?
One of my change times was when I had moved from Tata Global Beverages into Tetley in London, and there was a lot of change all around. So different culture, different set of people. I had moved from a business partnering to a COE role. There were remote teams all over the world. So it was a large level of complexity. I think one of the first things that I could do after some time is to set a charter, with all the country organizations for people around So set a structure, a discipline, come what may, there are certain things that will follow. I think that helped a lot. Second thing was also to take people along that their agenda and my agenda is a common agenda. And there were a couple of things where, the global the country organization. There were a couple of things where the country organization priorities. So we used to say freedom within a framework. So here is the framework. There are a couple of freedom elements. But if you go off track, then you'll be brought back forcibly. So setting that context also helped very much. The third one which helped was a very unemotive way to performance. There are reasons and there are outcomes. So for us, we were able to say, okay, there are human reasons, there are personal challenges, there are various possibilities we all go through. But the outcome is sealed in blood in many ways. So if we have committed something, we will deliver it come what may. We can change the target if required, if there is something which is earth-shattering. But I think those 3 or 4 elements really helped me personally and the teams around me.
Great. I think you pinpointed one of the key elements. In my, I was talking to some other guests about nurturing this intrapreneurial spirit, which is required at certain levels as well. And one of the anecdotes that came out was, in spite of and then because of, like we spoke of, these are reasons and then there are outcomes. And as long as I think you focus on the outcomes and commit to deliver to those outcomes in spite of whatever could come your way, either by altering the path, either by altering or changing some of the things that need to come out, I think significantly changes the way how people, even team members look at delivering to that in a performance format. But I think what I like about is that freedom within a framework, especially the newer generation, they like a certain amount of structure, but they are also okay to have a little bit of freedom, a little bit of ambiguity that lets them experiment, that lets them kind of drive themselves in ways that probably we've never been able to do. And the way the world is changing at such a pace, I think we can't do anything today, like they say, that is going to get us prepared for after the 5 years or the 10 years from now. So great. Thank you for bringing that out. Aarti, your thoughts on this, any phase of your work career that you've been and you've driven high performance teams?
I'll talk about my role in Walmart. And this is, when I took over the field role as the head of HR. As we all understand, when you are in field, the role dynamics are very different, and it's always a men dominant versus. And I was the first woman rather, who was selected for this role. So while there were biases also in terms of it, and I was not okay or prepared, but I was like, just swim. You just put it in the, the pool. You to just swim or sink, whatever. But I think thanks to the leaders around who, of course, gave me that ecosystem. Now, while I was there, I, of course, saw the barriers in terms of, can I do this? Can I do that? And of course, first was to have a boundaryless behavior. And what is in it to help them attune in terms of be a skill upliftment, be it in terms of helping them educate or give that exposure so that they can do that role. I think those are the barriers which I broke for. And, to again talk about and relate with an example of forklift driver, where it's predominantly driven by men, because these are like licenses which are big, heavy lift carts which are run through. It gave a feeling of pride when we had women, and giving them that exposure, they raising hand, giving them that exposure to get the train, upskill, and then move, and of course comes with monetary other benefits too. So I feel it's about all in a mindset. You to just have as a leader and break those barriers, bring in those boundaryless behavior. And as long as you find a hungry towards a person who's more hungry to learn, I think bringing that becomes our job then. And that's been my knack. How do I hook on people who are smart in terms of the intelligence? How do I see people who are hungry to learn and help them groom from that standpoint? And then, of course, on top of it, I think icing on the cake is the humility.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. And some of the elements that you spoke of about typically you will find this hunger go up and down, in your career span, depending on which phase of your career or personal life you are in. But I think some of the fresh of the college, the workforce that comes in, sometimes sees a drop in it because they think, now everything is done, and finally I'm into a job, and it takes a little bit amount of shaking them up and saying that, that hunger is what is going to help you drive this. It is also very critical as you get into a very comfort zone kind of space in your careers to be able to have that hunger. Do you think that there is any synergies, because the workforce currently has multi-generational people out there? I think instead of looking at it as a challenge, it's an opportunity to create something significantly, impactful than what probably the previous generations have been able to do, is because a fresh perspective from a much younger workforce, the wisdom that comes from the experienced ones, and stability that, or a methodology that, the mid folks bring in. I think they are a great combination to work with. Is that been a challenge to, I'm sure, you've led, both of you must have led teams that have these compositions, and how do you drive high performance into this? I know we all like to call it as a challenge, but have you seen opportunities for having this kind of a setup, and of course then having men and women as a gender also? Any thoughts from your personal learnings, both of you?
So if I may just want to probably reflect on two things, and one for team, I mean, the kind of a setup I'm into currently in Devyani, and specifically talking about retail or QSR space, Suruchi, it's a gig workforce.
Yeah.
So to answer you, one, that it itself is a huge animal in the room, when you talk about how do you manage that workforce and what do you bring in for them. But I think it's more about, in today's context, I think, and no right or wrong, it's a purpose-led setup. And as long as you feel meaningful in terms of, helping them, bring in that and nudge it through an experience, education, or learnings which they go through. The stickiness is there. The moment they feel that they're not adding value, it's no more about ticking years or tenure. We keep interviewing so many people. I'm sure Rahul would also believe in the same, that, for me, I think a 5 minutes context, and that comes with experience, you get to know that. I think I look and resonate more from a cultural perspective. And for me, if a person, as long as, is attuned to the kind of setup I'm looking forward to, I leave it on self, as leaders, to take it a challenge, and how do you drive that purpose? So, so that's how I drive the team. And like I said, when there are other workforces, you just have to nudge into the different ways and be more competitive and edge on the curve,
Yeah, agree. Rahul, your thoughts on this?
Policy for us is, a reference document to ensure business continuity.
Yeah.
So let's take a very simple thing of promotions, and this is appraisal season. So, typically you have 3 appraisal cycle, 2 appraisal cycles, all, baby boomer and 1980s organizations have that kind of structures, 5-year awards. We now have half of the workforce, which is, below 25 years. Their employee life cycle is 3 years tops. And Aarti rightly said, is if there's no purpose, if there is not second skill which I'm putting up, I don't need to spend time here. I can, quote unquote, drive an Uber and get this money out and, do something else.
Yeah.
I think for us, one of the things that we try and do is, policy is a tool to do business properly. So while there are governance parameters, there's huge amount of flexibility that we try and operate between these 3 sets of people that you talked about. The second thing which we try and do is, the purpose is common. If you are in a shop floor working on an injectable line, or you are in pharma sales in the field, there are a couple of things which are common: the touch and feel, the way we reach out to employees, your hiring, your pay slip, your performance appraisal design, that's common. There are no challenges. However, if you are in a talent cycle, your growth in the first level and the growth in the last level are very different. How you're compensated, is also very different. So I think that flexibility we have started in, practicing, I think, for the last couple of years, and that's really helped us.
Absolutely. I think, and I'm resonating to this because yesterday we had a leadership offsite here. All our leaders across the country came in, and we've been planning for the new year. And one of the key aspects was this, that policy and documentation is to drive overall fine governance, that keeps things in order. But at the end of the day, leaders as human beings, managers as human beings, definitely have the discretion to go around the policy to make things happen for different kinds of people, because different requirements, different wants of different people could be catered to. And while there has to be a fine balance between, treating everyone all, at the end of the day, everyone cannot, one size doesn't fit all most number of times. So if again, I think it's about having a framework, but still having the freedom within the framework that comes into the picture. So very beautiful. I also feel very rightly put, and we not sure if you know, but Jombe's engagement framework has a very important pillar of purpose. And if you look at the younger generation, especially, you spoke about half of the population now being less than 25 years, half of your team workforce is less than 25 years. The way the younger millennials or the Gen Zs are looking at life, fortunately or unfortunately, none of them have a food problem. When you have a food problem, you have only one problem. When you don't have a food problem, you have all kinds of problems, right? But the way they are looking at is bang on. They are looking for purpose. There has to be something that goes deep within them that connects them with your strategic goals, your organization. They need to be felt belonged there to be able to up their game and perform. Otherwise, it's absolutely easy to just switch and get into some other organization, start off something freelance, get into the gig economy, and absolutely make money and survive.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our things are taken care of already, fortunately, by our previous generations. But I think purpose significantly drives, high performance, especially in the younger workforces. And I think that's great because they are looking at life far more meaningfully in a lot of ways than how some of the older generations thought of it, like a job, like a safety net, like something that I need to survive.
Like early 20s and just pass out of colleges, etc. He does this job for like 4 months and then he takes a break of a year.
Yeah.
And that's to enjoy life because he says, I've taken my pocket money, I have to enjoy. And like, I've driven my purpose. Now I need a break. I'm like, my God, if this is where, the youth is progressing, God save corporates and stuff,
Absolutely.
so yeah. And there are no qualms, there are no regrets, that is how it is.
Thank you. Switching gears a little bit here and focusing on, women in workforce at junior levels, mid levels, and senior levels. If you both had to think about a couple of tips that you would like to give to women at different levels, when they are looking at junior levels, of course, how are you driving high performance within yourself at whatever you're taking up? And then especially at the mid-career levels, how are you looking at driving a high performance team that you're responsible for? And then at senior levels, where you are driving high performance, not just at your team level, but how are you driving that very important agenda, even at the board level, at business units level? What would those tips be from you? And Rahul, if you could get started with you.
So I think before I go into that, I must say I think I must compliment Jombe, and there are a couple of organizations who are trying to do this, is to look at the funnel. Because I think the first part of diversity era was, hum kisi se kam nahi. So we are trying to, do equal things, get included, that part of it. And quote unquote, there are a lot of angry young men also out there whose jobs are getting mitigated. Let's face that. Very few people talk about it, but in Europe, there is there are quite a number of articles popping up. In India, there is also certain early stages where there's a quote unquote woman reservation also going out in terms of pink hiring. And that's going to catch up very, very shortly. I'm pretty open about this. So if that context in mind, when you look at the workforce, I think what we try and do is to improve the funnel. How many percentage of your, let's say, first line managers are getting into people management responsibilities and moving forward? I think that is a critical indicator where your programs would be very helpful. Having said that, I think when you are a woman coming out of college, I think one of the first things that you need to do is to get familiar with the environment and to ensure that you do individual excellence. It's pretty easy for a woman because you can multitask, you can go through priorities. And we've done some extensive studies within the company, and we've seen one of the things that is a hindrance is esteem. A lot of women employees suggest to us that when we are in a meeting with somebody else, the manager, mostly a male, will critically evaluate me more than my male counterpart. So I think the first stage would be individual excellence plus a mindset topic would really help the first level. The second level is more about cutting across the organization and collaboration. And that also, I think women employees are very, very well equipped because they are neither in the smoke breaks nor in the pub breaks. So there is, and something that you wrote about, I think, from a safe space of conversation, confidentiality, it comes very naturally. So for them to be able to cut across organization, collaborate is a natural strength. I think that can help tremendously. When it comes to senior level, I think then it's all about being the agony aunt, because to be honest with you, when you are at that level, you're only dealing with uh, skewed egos or emotions of people around you, in all reality.
Yeah.
And to be stay able to stay neutral and get them focused back on the organization purpose is something which has worked very well for women. So those would be my top three.
I think thank you for pinpointing some of the very women specific traits, especially the last one, at senior levels, handling those skewed egos and very carefully bringing everyone back to what is important for the larger good can be driven very well, I think by the women. Any thoughts, Aarti? What are your tips for helping yourself kind of drive this high performance?
Yeah, so Suruchi, for me, when I look at and maybe I'll take holistically men and women both. I think it's more about a shift of and we might have learned about a V shape to a T shape talent progression. And that's where I feel that, in your young careers, while you are pursuing, etc., you join, you work on a role, etc., it's more limited to what you hired for and you start developing that deep skill in that role. I think for me, and it works naturally with different levels and hierarchy when you move up. How do you transition and move to a T broadened skill, which is helping you give that broad variety or range of the entire skill? I think for me, when I look at and just to start with that connotation and stitch it with women as well, in the initial career while they are progressing and when they're moving on up the grade, I think, which I just said in my earlier conversation, it has to be a boundaryless behavior where today you are a hustler. When you actually step into any role, it doesn't matter whether it's an MNC, Indian, etc., startup, not non-startup. I think that mindset needs to be there for youth. As long as you're a hustler, you're doing well, that naturally gives you that edge as a woman where your confidence boost up, you empower, you start empowering, you just start loving those skills.
Yeah.
And naturally, when you move up the curve, I think your decision making, taking along the teams, driving a high performance culture, that just comes naturally.
Sure.
And for me, when you actually come in a progression stage, which is like more leadership, it's more about visionary and driving a purpose. So today, when I hire people in my team, I do not show them just the path of organization. It's the purpose, what we want to live in for our function, and how do I see, women around me growing for them. So how do I build in those lean in circles, help them in the mentoring or the coaching aspect? I think those are the different shades from a hustler to, where you start taking the teams together, leading it, from the forefront, and then moving more towards a visionary leader side, driving the purpose around the setup. Yeah.
One final question. I think everywhere across the globe, the numbers are very clear. While the numbers look great when it comes to diversity, at the bottom of the pyramid, the top of the pyramid is, really, really bad. And on the other side, we heard Rahul talk about, how men are also, struggling with, a lot of their jobs getting replaced because we are trying to also drive this agenda. Personally, we feel merit should supersede everything else. And hopefully most organizations are going that route. But having all these things as a context in the background, what do you think organizations are wanting or should be doing, looking at the future? I mean, artificial intelligence is out there, very, very real now. Another 12 to 18 months and our jobs are going to look very, very different. What are some of the key things organizations should be looking at to bring in, as very specific things that women could bring, especially at the top? Because if AI is coming in the picture, most of our job descriptions are getting changed. Are there specific elements that women specifically will add in a world which is going to look very different? And currently, those kind of aspects are missing, especially at the top, because we don't have as many women there. Any thoughts? Have you thought about this future like this, and thought about what women could add to it?
So if I have to look at, while artificial intelligence, of course, will supersede most of the stuff in roles, skills, etc. If I have to talk about looking at a women aspect more at a leadership level, I think it's very important and critical to have, and maybe to have a defined percentage or a seat on the table and help them with that exposure on the board. There are companies which have started, and glad to share one of the companies reached out to me as well, to have my learning journey, if I need to be a part of this board program, which helps me get that exposure and also, helps me in terms of nudge through, getting that experience there, learning through various industries, and obviously with the experience which one comes up brings in, how do you encompass or bring that girl to the rest of the setup. So if I have to answer you, artificial intelligence will have a role, but that role is more to create, I think that's a mundane role which will get replaced. You will still need emotional intelligence, which cannot be driven through artificial intelligence. And like I said, that knack, that art, for me, if I have to talk about, it's the women who has definitely that edge. So how do you like translate those nudges and bring that act on the skill on the table? I think that's where I would want to probably share
Sure.
my part of, yeah.
Rahul, your thoughts, especially at the senior levels, what do you think women could bring in?
No, I think what I said earlier is I think it becomes a conscience keeper of the organization, keeping ambiguity away, keeping a lot of emotions away, not trying to intertwine politics, just keep clarity on the purpose. I think those are certain strengths, which a leader requires. And I'll kind of try and put the gender agenda here. For me, the gender agenda, I think, should focus more on the funnel because in multiple organizations where there are great women leaders, when you look at their diversity numbers in the balance sheet for 3 years, it has not changed.
Yeah.
They have only hired men below them to get the work done. And quote unquote, I'm sorry, but they have used a woman card to find their way up there.
Sure.
Now that's got to catch up, hopefully. So for me, the focus would be, if you really want to make that difference, is have really strong middle management program, find out breeding ground jobs where in classical era where you ran development centers, you shadowed people, you allowed a cohort to get their placement, that is going to make a difference. Because then at the senior level, you require your emotional and conceptual ability, but you also are required to know the business and the insights. And if you've taken a shortcut or a quick rocket up there, then that's going to catch up. So for me, the working on that middle management for diversity is the key, because a quick data that we had done a research on in one of the organizations, that woman career gets broken on the 4th and the 7th year, marriage, childbirth, typically. And if organizations can work around that, build systems, processes to help women employees, carry over those 2 years or 3 years, I think that's going to really make this thing robust.
Absolutely. I think, like Rahul pinpointed, and you also said that's the reason we started off last year with the mid-career women professionals as a focus, because that's where the maximum drop-off happens. And hopefully, if we are able to build that middle, like they say, the middle frozen, frozen middle, and, shake them up, women or men. But yeah, the focus here of the movement is women. I think then shortcuts won't be needed. I think women will be at the top and yet have many more women and men under them, getting things done. So some of the key takeaways from this podcast for me personally are, how are we looking at, freedom within a framework? How are we looking at boundaryless behaviors? How are we looking at purpose driving high performance at the end of the day, as the newer generation is becoming more and more in percentage with the rest of the generations out there as well. Of course, also driving a lot of governance through policy, but having flexibility to be able to drive those right levers with the right set of people to drive high performance, because I think high belongingness drives kind of contributes a lot to high performance as well. So thank you very much, both of you, for sharing your thoughts, your personal journeys as well with us.